Good morning. I'm the Reverend Kevin Tarsa, privileged to serve this community. As we're looking largely full, as we often are on Sundays, I invite you just throughout the service, if new people are coming in, to help them find space, right? So they don't have to crawl over too many people or walk necessarily all the way down front. So yeah, help people know where the spaces are. And if you're willing to free up an aisle seat, that makes it easier for people to sit there. I know, whether you're here for the first time or for the manyth time, that much is in your heart this morning. Much is in your mind and in your heart. And so to help us be present to ourselves and to each other, I invite us all to turn off our cell phones and those devices that silence or turn off these devices that might otherwise call for our attention. And I invite each of us to receive 3 increasingly meaningful breaths, perhaps taking 2 sips each time on the way in, and then releasing our breath more and more slowly each time. Sometimes it helps to breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth. Let us be for each other community in this hour. Beloved community, connected in ways that matter, connected to each other in this room and the rooms beyond and the Zoom room, interwoven with humanity in the ever wider circles of our neighborhood, connected in our country, connected in our state, our nation, our county, our beautiful and aching world, connected to life across this spinning blue-green miracle, part and parcel of the largest and deepest truths that we know. This morning, Worship Associate Randy McCain offers our land acknowledgement.
By placing this basket of black oak acorns on our altar, we acknowledge the Nisenan people are still here among us today, though nearly invisible after generations of erasure and exclusion from California's history. We understand we are on Nisenan land that was never ceded, never given up, and the original tribal families have yet to recover from the genocide of their people. We commit ourselves to supporting the Nisenan in their efforts to stabilize their people and restore tribal sovereignty. Rochelle Elias lights our chalice this morning, the flaming chalice that symbolizes the heritage and the future of this faith tradition we've inherited.
Our chalice lighting words come from Elizabeth M. Strong. Our Unitarian heritage bids us light our chalice in the name of freedom, in the light of reason, in actions of tolerance. We gather in community to celebrate a heritage of freedom, reason, and tolerance. Our Universalist heritage bids us light our chalice in the name of faith, in the light of hope, in actions of love. We gather in community to celebrate a heritage of faith, hope, and love. Let us bring this Unitarian Universalist heritage into our world and our lives today.
I invite us to sing our very youngest members on their way to Kids Connection, which we don't get to go to. And it's also a great time to help people who are arriving find a place, and it looks like Lindsay's coming to get the light of the chalice to take with, so that a piece of this light goes with our young folks as we sing This Little Light of Mine.
Good morning. My name is Randy McCain, your worship associate for this morning's service. Today, we continue to explore this month's theme of heritage, specifically as it pertains to Unitarian Universalism. Reverend Kevin will be talking about our UU forebears, early Protestants who are open to religious freedoms and multiple viewpoints regarding spirituality. We will hear from a group who are exploring one of these constituent traditions, our own UU Humanism group. In fact, I unknowingly am wearing the humanism outfit today. I realize you'll see later. But for those of us raised in a different spiritual tradition, Presbyterianism, for those of us who discovered Unitarian Universalism later in life, my mid-30s, which is quite a while ago, for those of us who perhaps first saw UUism primarily as a liberation from dogmas, rites, and rituals that no longer pertain to us, it can be easy to continue to view the openness of Unitarian Universalism as an escape route away from something. But when we examine the origins of UU and even the beginnings of our own UUCM, it helps us to see that this escape route, this openness, is actually a multifaceted, well-researched, very thoughtful guidebook to places we never knew existed, yet have been there all along. And it is always great to have fellow travelers on the journey to point out all the cool and interesting sights. And who knows, we may decide to settle down in one of these spots. So welcome to this place we call the Unitarian Universalist Community of the Mountains.
Thank you, Randy, and I invite Renee Wiley forward for something special.
Good morning. This congregation is a part of the Unitarian Universalist Association, member congregation. And for 60 years, the UU Women's Federation, also part of the UUA, has built covenantal relationships among UU women from all over the nation that equip us all to be better co-conspirators, better allies in the movement for collective liberation. Some of the areas of focus of the UU Women's Federation are women's workplace issues, reproductive justice, stopping violence against women, as well as LGBTQ and trans rights. And you can learn more about that if you wish at the UUWF.org website. Our UUCM Women's Group supports the UUWF this month by honoring Anita Wald-Tuttle with a Clara Barton Sisterhood membership. Catherine Young, I'll invite up here now to present to Anita this honor and to share about her immeasurable contribution to Unitarian Universalism and the founding of this congregation. Catherine. Okay.
After Renee told the UUCM Women's Group about the UU Women's Federation's Clara Barton Sisterhood, we unanimously decided to sponsor Anita's enrollment. And we took a collection for the entry fee or whatever. Leslie Champlin wrote a beautiful letter that extolled Anita's many accomplishments. And in fact, Renee included, I think, the entire letter in her column in the October Mountain Chalice, and it's got a lot of really amazing stuff in it, so I highly recommend you read it if you hadn't already. The letter obviously impressed the UU Women's Federation because Anita soon received a letter from the president of the UUWF along with a beautiful certificate. Ugh. This beautiful certificate, which we are going to display in the back later. Okay, okay, lost my place. Anita has done much for UU communities throughout her life, but she is the founding mother of UUCM. In the early 1990s, UUs in Grass Valley, Nevada City, had to drive all the way to Auburn to get their weekly fix of UUism, which means most of them didn't. Many of them supported the church but didn't actually attend. And so Anita proposed that they begin having once a month a meeting in Grass Valley. And she, in fact, hosted the very first Getting Acquainted meeting in her living room. And that was in 1994. This was the beginning of what became the UU Community of the Mountains. She also helped obtain the UUA charter in 1995 and was elected president of the board in 2001. And then again, she thinks it was 2008, but don't quote me. And she has probably served on nearly every committee that UUCM has ever had. At 96, Anita is more active than people 20 to 30 years younger than her. She walks a mile every day around her apartment complex. She takes Zumba classes. She serves on the governing board of Connecting Point, an organization in our county that coordinates 211, in-home support services, disaster assistance, job training, and much more. As a member of the Stop the Mine task force, Anita walked all over Nevada City and Grass Valley to various businesses asking for signatures for the Stop the Mine petition. How many of us did that? Not me. And every month, Anita shows up at the UUCM Women's Group potluck with a freshly made from scratch offering that is always enticing and flavorful. She doesn't take any shortcuts. Anita is my hero. I am always telling her that I want to be just like her when I grow up, and I've got, a ways to go because she's got a 31-year head start. Please join us after the service in the Alcott room back by the kitchen for cupcakes and sparkling cider to celebrate Anita. We will display her certificate and also this amazing photo of Anita from the 1980s dressed as Clara Barton. If that isn't a synchronicity, I don't know what is, but she looks pretty amazing in her 50s here. Let's see. And maybe, if we are really lucky, Anita will share the secret of her boundless energy and unwavering determination to make a difference every day of her life. And now Anita is going to follow up with her own little history, so she probably will hit a bunch of things I missed.
I want to thank all of the people who are involved in helping to make this presentation to me. It was something completely I had never thought about, obviously. So when they brought it up at a meeting and I'm sitting there and thinking, well, Clara Barton, what's going on here? And then I just thought, I'll sit back and see what happens. And what happened, I got that beautiful certificate in the mail. And then one day I opened up a pack of photographs that I was getting ready to pack, and I just pulled one out. And there was this picture of me dressed as Clara Barton doing a program down in San Diego for the church there when they were honoring some of the illustrious women from the early history of UU. And that's how the two of them came together. So I am very honored to be honored like this. And I thought, I remember when, I think it was Kevin who gave a program once and said, oh, take one word that you would say describes you. And I didn't have to think very long because the word caregiver came to mind. And I realized that I had been a caregiver all my life. Went back to caring for a family of 4 kids. But also when I was 12 years old, I started being a babysitter. So I was taking care of a lot of little kids. And then that morphed into being a homeroom teacher, a homeroom mother, PTA, all of those sorts of things. I'm sure women in the room are nodding in agreement because they've been hit up for that job too. And that continued on, and I became part of a campfire girls group. And then when that kind of disintegrated, I ended up joining the Scouts. And for 25 years, I was involved with Girl Scouting, all the way from the very littlest ones, when my daughter Marcy, who's with me this morning, was part of an exchange with the teacher who was leading the group. She said, if you'll come and do arts and crafts, which I know nothing about, I'll give you free dance lessons. Well, we couldn't pass that up. So I started 25 years of Girl Scouting. And that turned into lots of other things, like about 30 or more different organizations over my lifetime that I've been involved with. And some of them actually started in this building because I lived here for almost 7 years as a manager. And somebody that I ran into would say, well, we're looking for a place where we can meet. And I said, oh, I have the perfect place here. We can kind of extend our insurance to cover you, and we won't charge you anything, but you could give us a goodwill offering if you wish. So a lot of things like Hospitality House came here because our musician friend started that organization, and it happened in our back room in the Alcott room. And I was there that night when we welcomed our first homeless person and gave him hospitality for the night, a warm dinner and a warm place to stay. So Hospitality House got a start here. I think also that Habitat for Humanity had their meetings here. We may even have had a hand a little bit in interfaith food ministry. So there are lots of projects that we helped to sponsor here. So I got involved with all of them, of course, because I lived here. And as I say, I belong to over 30 organizations in my life. And then I found out there were churches, and I started counting churches. And though I grew up as a Presbyterian, nods to Randy, I discovered Unitarianism when a friend of mine invited me to go and see Frank Lloyd Wright's church. Now, he happened to be my hero. And so I went on Sunday morning to see the church and took Marcy with me. And when we went into the RE room, this nice red floor, heated room, there was a sandbox in the middle of it. Marcy made a beeline for it, and I couldn't get her out of it. So she stayed there, and I went in to listen to the minister and met the people afterwards during social hour. And guess what? I joined. That was the first of 9 Unitarian churches that I've been involved with. This being the 9th, and the greatest honor to have been part of its beginning. And it's not going to be ending. It's going to be growing because we're looking for a new place that'll hold more people. And I'm looking forward to that. Thank you very much.
I hear that from people so often. I want to be like Anita. I want to be Anita when I grow up. Thank you, Anita. I served as an interim minister of music for a year in East Lansing, Michigan, a congregation that Anita Wald-Tuttle held together for a number of years through some very difficult times, way before my time there. Yeah. So I got to benefit from your work, Anita, even in that way, as well as here. Thank you. It's a little bit boomy on the microphone. So these opening words are really the first half of the sermon, just so you know. So get your coffee out. For centuries, the Roman Catholic Church, the Holy Roman Empire, controlled with an increasingly opulent and corrupt iron fist the ways that Christianity was interpreted and expressed in Western Europe. But once printing presses made it possible to get the Christian Bible in people's hands and in their language, starting about in the mid-1400s, more people had a chance to read for themselves and interpret the texts and the teachings for themselves, to interpret the life and the message of Jesus for themselves, which, as you can imagine, ripped open a giant can of worms, right? All these different interpretations. The wrigglings of those worms, as we look back, began to mark the end of the Middle Ages, in fact. So this attempt to reform the Catholic Church, people weren't trying to do away with it, they just wanted to improve it, right? They wanted to get it back, actually. So the protesters saw those original Christian communities as more true to what Christianity should be, not the big churches and all the structures of processes that had been developed. These Protestant reformers wanted to get back to that. And so this whole movement represented a constellation of movements whose implications were as political and social as they were theological. So not just about religious ideas, but it also had implications for how we are together as human beings. Among the most radical of those Protestant reformers were some of our ancestors, who 450 years ago in Poland, of all places, dug into and argued about and developed and wrote about wild ideas that later influenced persons across Europe, and in time, the founders of this nation, and in time, the Unitarians and the Universalists in our United States, or our sort of United States. Those ancestors in Poland, they insisted mostly on allowing religious freedom. This was a novel idea in so many places, right? They insisted on people being able to have their own religious ideas. And they believed in the importance of our being willing to tolerate other people having different ideas than our own. Their goal, as I said, was to imitate the early Christian communities, and letting go of all the rest, they wanted to live. They said, how would we live if we live what Jesus taught? Going so far at first as to sell their personal property and give the money to the poor, to free their serfs, those who had wealth. They decided to own all their property in common. No one would have their own property, everyone would own it in common. They refused to fight in wars, and they wore wooden swords as a symbol that they weren't going to be killing anyone. They refused public office or gave up their public office. For a time, they got rid of the role of minister, gave everyone the chance to teach and preach, including women. They advocated for the education of women, and this is in the 1500s. At that time, they were considered kooky by the locals. But once their initial experiment kind of relaxed and settled into something more substantial and sustainable, they were considered terribly dangerous by the Catholic Church and other Protestant denominations, labeled as scum and demonic, in part because of questioning the existence of the Trinity and the precise divinity of Jesus, but also because they advocated and practiced religious tolerance and freedom of conscience. And because they came to understand their work to be not merely about changing themselves or being their own little community, they decided that their work was to change society. Dangerous. At the height of their journey, there were about 300 of these congregations in Poland. Country chapels with walls 3 feet thick at the base held meeting rooms on the first floor and a home for the minister and their family on the second floor. The members of the Minor Reformed Church of Poland, or the Polis Brethren, as they came to be known, or Arians, as their detractors called them, were within less than a generation driven out of Poland on pain of death and written out of Poland's history to this day. Their writings burned across Europe, their chapels, if not destroyed, like this one, turned into barns and storage buildings. Some of those brethren driven out of Poland found refuge in Transylvania. On my recent trip, several Unitarian ministers from Transylvania, who here in this ancient chapel are singing a traditional Transylvanian hymn in their honor, marked this as a pilgrimage. So this would have been the meeting room, right, where the services were held. There are quotes in Latin that still grace the inside walls. Here are the words one would see when leaving this particular chapel. Sic vos non vobis nidificatis aves, meaning in essence, you birds make nests, but not for yourselves. The message to our ancestors, and perhaps to us, being you work, but not for yourself. And the thing is, though these ancient ancestors were very much Christian, this is not a quote from the Bible. It's a quote from the ancient Roman poet Virgil. At the time, Poland was the center of European intellectual thought and culture. It was Poland's golden age. Once the Catholic Church had made Italy unsafe for radical thinking, all those stirrings of the Italian Renaissance, fed by rediscoveries of ancient Greek and Roman writings, all of that moved for a time to the more tolerant and thus safer Poland. Poland, which if you can believe it, elected its kings. People voted for their king. Wealthy landowners voted for their king. At a time and a place where the Catholic Church had arrived in Poland more recently, and it held less of a hold. This is where Copernicus had just decentered the earth and named the sun the center of our circling, where new ideas had more room to breathe, at least for a time. This is not Poland, and not the 1500s. This is Boston, where the Universalists, who long knew in the depths of their souls that God is love, above all love, they had no remaining Universalist churches in 1959. So some of the Universalists tried a bold experiment into the new day. In this city empty of Universalist churches, they said, we're going to try something new. So they established a humanist Universalist congregation at the Charles Street Meeting House, which 100 years earlier had been the first Free Baptist church, the first integrated church in America. The Reverend Kenneth Patton, who had just helped the Unitarian Church in Madison, Wisconsin to commission a building design from Frank Lloyd Wright, was charged with the task of this new venture. And Patton noted that there were two kinds of religious buildings. He said there are meeting houses and there are temples. A meeting house, he wrote, was simply a place of meeting. It's a shelter for fellowship. Its unadorned emptiness is to be filled with people and invites the inner quietness of the people in the room. The building itself, he says nothing. If anything at all is spoken, it's by the people gathered in it. Its emptiness doesn't intrude on the inner light of those attending. In other words, it offers a blank canvas. The temple, he wrote, is just the opposite. A temple has a central theme or a meaning in its dominant architecture. It's often lavishly decorated with related symbols and art. The temple itself is an expression of a vision and of reality, of life. Instead of being merely the bare room in which words are spoken or a sermon is delivered, he said a temple itself preaches its own sermon through the architecture, through the artistic voices. So this naturalist humanist minister and the congregation transformed that Charles Street sanctuary, that meeting house, into a temple. The pews were moved into a circle. An inlaid tile image of the earth was there in the center, with no political boundaries marked, so that the people attending could see each other and know themselves part of the entire human race. Prominent there across that room, not a cross, but a painting of what was then known as the Andromeda Nebula, balanced on the other side of the room that we can't see by a mobile of an atom, so that the parishioners would know their place in the cosmos as between the atom and the stars. The altar is a bookcase filled with the world's scriptures, poetry, philosophy, and science. On it, an oil lamp lit at the beginning of every service and extinguished at the end, and this was before the flaming chalice became a Unitarian Universalist symbol. Adorning these walls and up and down on the side of the nebula there, 65 symbols of world religions and humanity's strivings, ancient and new. You may have seen this poster on our walls with a few of those 65 symbols, which are now in the hands of the Star King School for the Ministry here in Oakland. Now later I'll come back to the humanism underneath this experiment, but here I want to lift up another of their remodeling projects. The Reverend Kenneth Patton at that Charles Street Meeting House took another familiar structure, familiar church hymns, and wrote new words for this new humanist congregation. And it's no accident that he took this tune, which many of you will recognize as "A Mighty Fortress is Our God," right? The Lutheran hymn. And he gave it the opening line, "We are the earth, upright and proud." So I invite us to rise in body or in spirit and to sing it. It's still in our hymn books, number 303. And now you may not agree with or hold this theology, and I invite you to see what it feels like for you to couple this melody with these words, and to know that its spirit serves some people in the room very well, and others probably not so much. I bet that's been a while since some of you have sung that melody. Who grew up with it? Who grew up with it as a mainstay? Yeah, lots of folks. Samuel Adler's a contemporary composer, and he came to us UU musicians, I don't know, about 20 years ago, and he said, "Stop writing new words to the hymns." He said, "Write your own hymns." So don't take that and revamp it. Write new music for this new day. For joys and sorrows, this weekly ritual, I want to offer words from the new UUA president. You may have seen these, the Reverend Dr. Sophia Betancourt, and she wrote to us regarding the conflict between Israel and Hamas. Here are her words. Beloveds, I invite you to stop what you are doing if you can and sit with me in the depth of this tragedy. How to reconcile the cost of occupation and of war. How to nuance two very real histories of oppression and violence. I'm holding close the words of UN Middle East Peace Envoy Tor Wennesland, who said, "This is a dangerous precipice, and I appeal to all to pull back from the brink." She goes on, we as a people of faith can condemn violence against civilians while at the same time engaging the full legacies and histories of oppression that shape such devastating conflict. As a faith tradition, Unitarian Universalists have long worked for peace, and our principles and values call for the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. At the same time, we have not engaged these tangled issues surrounding Israel and Palestine in a community since 2018. And our last engagement resulted in severed relationships and deep pain. She writes, I pray for the people of Israel and Palestine. I pray for leaders around the globe who must respond to this latest flare of violence and the untenable ethical considerations that abound. I pray for Muslim and Jewish UUs who experience the impact of this long strife acutely. I pray that those of us less likely to know the trauma of unending brutality and harm will not turn away from generational loss, from the devastating realities and their root causes, or from the relentless tragedy of war and occupation. Be gentle with yourselves, but do not turn away unless you must. We are one global family living tenuously on the same human-impacted earth. Let us center ourselves in justice as we call for peace. Peace, salam, shalom. 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 Invite Randy to light our two large candles this morning. The people in Israel, the people in Palestine, the people connected to the people in Israel and Palestine. Invite us to hold that even as we hold the rest that we carry. Maybe your week has been easy, maybe things are all smooth right now, and maybe there's something very difficult you've arrived with today. Know that the people around you will be in similar boats. Maybe it's all feeling good, but maybe not. I invite us in this ritual of putting stones in the bowl of water to hold each other tenderly. And this is one of those days when I invite us not to come up just one at a time, but to use the whole table, right? To take the personal time and space, yes, to honor what we're carrying, but also not to do it alone. So I invite you to use all the sides of the table to come up together as you do. And if you're not coming up, and even as you are, I invite you to still your heart, listen within, lift up the prayers that stir in you, if they do. Center your compassion and your love, and hold each other. I've placed stones for all that we're holding, all that the people who are online may have typed into the chat or held silently. Bowl of stones with water is one of our temple items, right? May it be for you in reality and in memory because of what it symbolizes. May it be for you a source of solace, source of comfort, source of connection, a reminder of being held, a reminder of not being alone. I invite you to take just a moment to hold all of this in your heart, just a moment of meditation, of stillness, of quietness, of prayer, the way a silence best meets you, knowing that you're not alone. May we remember. One of the challenges for those who do not hold a view of a reality beyond ours is to locate a place of solace, right? Locate a source of solace. I invite us to rise and to sing another humanist hymn, which tries to anchor that solace in each other, in the ways we care for and draw on each other. I invite you to rise in body or in spirit and to sing to mercy, pity, peace, and love. With harmonies. Thank you. I invite two members of UUCM's Humanist Discussion Group to share a few thoughts on their sense of humanism, beginning with Dave McLeod.
Well, it's been a few years since I've been up here, so this is humanism. I'd like to try to describe what humanism means to me personally. I, like many of us in this congregation, realized that we didn't become Unitarian Universalists when we found UUCM, but that we were already UUs whether we knew it or not. So it is with humanism and me. Since my classes in ethics and philosophy at the age of 20, I have searched for the coherent set of principles for life with which to guide my actions. It was 10 years ago that I was introduced to humanism by our UU Humanism discussion group. It was a definite match. Personally, I find that humanism is the ultimate pragmatic way of life. From the Stoic philosophers, we learn to accept the fact there are things that happen to us we cannot control. But we also know there are things that we can do something about. Remember those words from the familiar serenity prayer? Give me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. The real challenge, of course, is to know the difference. How do you do that? For humanists, knowledge is key. We strive for knowledge of other humans and the world around us. And humanists agree, knowledge of the world is derived by observation, investigation, and rational analysis. What does that mean to me personally? Personally, I try to follow Buddha. Believe only what you yourself test and judge to be true. See, that sounds pretty straightforward, but how in the world do you really do that? All personal knowledge is inescapably subjective. From psychology, we know we are much more susceptible to memorable, simple lies than complex truth, especially if the facts might not fit our biases. Also, evolution has trained us to make snap decisions. Is that a tiger in those bushes over there? Let me stop and think about that. So for me, to find truth, knowledge, and understanding requires that I must suspend initial judgment and get past my intuitive thinking to search for underlying facts. It takes intention and work, but I truly believe it's personally worth it in the long run. That's what I do when I'm at my best. Unfortunately, I'm not always at my best. The question that philosopher and psychologist William James asked, which humanist pragmatism seeks to answer, is about as loaded as they come. James asked, is life worthwhile? Is life worthwhile? His enigmatic answer, well, that's a hard one to say, enigmatic answer, is maybe. Maybe puts the onus on each person to make good a meaningful life. To find, but more important to the point, make something of value before it's too late. Maybe makes it clear that each individual is responsible for making their life worthwhile through their understanding, wisdom, and agency. Before I became acquainted with humanism, people would ask me what I really believed in, and I'd say, well, I guess I'm an atheist. That always disturbed me because it was describing what I wasn't, not what I was. Humanism gives me a coherent framework for that philosophy that I have searched for most of my life. Thanks.
Well, I didn't get the email dress code that Dave and Randy got, so we get something different up here. So I first heard about the existence of humanism 20 years ago. It wasn't kept hidden from me. It's just that in contrast to Dave, I never looked for a philosophy of life or contemplated a worldview. I was happy with my life living in the foothills with Janet, and my occupation as an analytical chemist. It all worked so well. Chemicals always behaved as expected. Reactions proceeded as according to plan. Analytical instruments were calibrated and then provided concentrations with great accuracy and precision. Yes. A place where things were carefully isolated, identified, and quantified. I enjoyed the awe and appreciation I felt for the natural world around me and learning how it all worked together, and had not been moved to look beyond that. But when I heard about humanism, it interested me. I can't recall the exact context of when I first heard the term humanism, but it prompted me to learn more about it. And the more I learned, the closer I felt to identifying with it. And yes, those words I think many of you may have heard in one context or another, and Dave just alluded to, came out of my mouth. I'm a humanist and I didn't realize it until now. Some of you may have had a similar experience when you first learned about Unitarian Universalism. This is from the United Kingdom Humanists, and it nicely summarizes a humanist's view of life, and I fully endorse it. A humanist is someone who, recognizing that life is short and seeing no evidence of an afterlife and no outside hand who shapes our fate, resolves to lead a fulfilled and moral life, accepting that all that matters then is how we treat people and other animals, as well as the planet around us, cherishing happiness, freedom, and progress, and enjoying the one life we have. Thank you.
Dave and George, I'm so grateful for your willingness to speak. This is part of who we are, right? To hear from each other what we're seeing, what we're feeling, what we're knowing, what we're expecting. So thank you. That's beautiful. I think often of the fact that my parents somehow taught my 7 siblings and I to value integrity and our own conscience. It wasn't their words, but somehow the way they lived that informed and shaped each of us. And I am certain that they never expected their modeling to lead a few of us so far from their own devout Catholicism. We got the message, but it took us places I think that they didn't intend. Both of our Unitarian Universalist parent traditions, Universalism and Unitarianism, each Christian traditions, gradually held more and more space for diverse religious ideas. Both came to the conclusion that if we are to be true to our heritages and to our consciences, we must make space for religious beliefs that are different than our own personal beliefs. Like the Polish brethren, they each came in their own time and their own language and following their own paths, first to the importance of living the religion of Jesus rather than a religion about Jesus. And this led them ultimately, based on that example, to a very open embrace of religious perspectives, at least in aspiration. Even religious perspectives, ultimately, that did not include God. Very far from the parents' expectations of where their values would lead. By 1886, in the wake of the Civil War, the Western Unitarian Conference, Western at that time meaning around the Mississippi River Basin, that conference refused to define itself as Christian, already in 1886, and they refused to make any form of theism a requirement because they didn't want to limit people. And that opened up a whole nother can of worms, as you can imagine. And then the destruction and the terror of the First and Second World Wars challenged both Unitarian and Universalist optimism in human nature and challenged people's faith in God too. How could people treat each other so cruelly? And how could God allow it? Questions in this day too. New science-rooted discoveries fed a call among a growing number of people for a religion based not on ancient texts and ideas, but on new ideas. A religion rooted not in miracles and the supernatural, they said, but based in the natural world. A religion focused not on the individual, but on the social nature of each person and on social change. A religion not based in concern about God, but in a concern for humanity. A religion focused not on another realm and another life hereafter, but on this life, in this world. The question became, of course, can there be a religion without God? By 1933, a group of humanists in Chicago had issued the first of 3 humanist manifestos. It, quote, defined the universe as self-existing, not the work of a creator, saw humanity as part of nature, rejected revelation as a basis for knowledge, affirmed science as the basis of knowledge, and declared theism of any kind to be outdated, which launched us into a whole controversy known as the humanist controversy that continues to play itself out right into this day and at times in this congregation. True? True. Now, technically, humanism isn't incompatible with the belief in God or conceptions of the divine or ultimate. For example, humanism can be understood as recognizing human dignity and freedom and happiness and human well-being and responsibility and justice as integral to God's desire, as integral to Spirit's plan and intention. They aren't mutually exclusive, but the way that humanism is much more commonly understood and defined and claimed, as George and Dave have articulated so beautifully and thoughtfully, as the humanist manifestos each did too, they name it as a rejection of anything supernatural, anything outside of the natural world that we inhabit. And because those of us who were wounded within our religious experience of the past so longed for room for our own non-theistic ideas, those of us who went that direction, who so longed to be able to live our own integrity, and because the space for some of us to breathe like that was so rare and so precious for so long, that in a community like this, for these folks, when theistic beliefs enter what they've come to identify as safe and unencumbered space, it can feel like a frightening encroachment, as if the space is moving back to something previous, as if the space for our truths is in jeopardy, as it was for so many of our ancestors and their truths across all the ages, like the Christian Polish brethren, trying to make space for their new ways of seeing and being exiled, driven out of their land. And this is the uncomfortable and growthful edge to which I would like to invite us all. It takes conscious commitment and courage and effort. It takes compassion and generosity to be together in one community, whether in a meeting house or a temple, to be together in one community meant to help us discover and hold and celebrate and reinforce and live our deepest and most defining values, while at the same time, we allow the expression of different religious or theological views that are not our own. We're here to reinforce our deepest values, right? And at the same time, make space for people's religious ideas and beliefs are different than our own. And this is true whether those ideas are expressed from the front, from the center, from the pews, from the person sitting next to us, or from the person across the table from us at a meeting, or in a sharing circle, or at a potluck. Now, I realize that part of what makes this so very challenging is that the typical religious setting in Western cultures like ours is set up to define and celebrate and support exactly the beliefs that everyone in that community is supposed to hold, right? It's part of what holds the group together. Or at the very least, to argue, to share at some level. They should have these shared beliefs. Or at the very least, to argue about those beliefs with the goal of winning the argument. If we're not all feeling the same, let's hash it out so to get to the right answer. That's the dynamic, that's the expectation set up in churches in general, right? It's naming the beliefs of the community. So this several hundred-year-old experiment is asking us to swim upstream against those assumptions and those expectations and those fears about religious community. That when someone says something, it's speaking for everyone. What defines this tradition, at least in aspiration and from way back, is a set of deep shared values that live way beneath the level of our individual beliefs, coupled with a commitment to make room for a range of beliefs without assuming that anyone's view, including the ministers, is speaking for everyone, without assuming that the expression of someone else's view impinges or negates our view, without assuming that we have to argue with someone to agree with us. It takes a generosity of heart. It takes a relaxation of our guardedness. It takes a knowledge that we can hold our own view with integrity, and that at the same time, so can our neighbor. It takes the awareness that some songs or services or readings or rituals or prayers might not meet us where we are, and that we can rejoice and be genuinely happy that those things are meeting that person over there exactly where they are. I know, it's a lot to ask, especially of those of us who grew up in communities that did not make room for what we could feel and see and know, who did not make room for what we believed, who did not make room for us. It's possible to live this venture differently than we grew up with, I would offer. So let's practice. Yes, in general, but also right now. And me included, right in this service, which celebrates not merely our UU heritage of humanism, but also beneath that humanism, the open embrace that made room for it. So just briefly, I'm curious, who would identify as having a strong sense and valuing of the divine or spirit or presence or any way you want to name that piece? For whom is this a strong piece? Yeah. Who's in the middle? Not quite sure. I haven't really sorted it out, still trying to figure it out. And who thinks of themselves as much more in this humanist part of the equation? This natural word is world is your source. Who doesn't care? And there we are. So earlier I read Dr. Sophia Betancourt's words of comfort and challenge around what's happening in the Middle East. Her prayer was worded in a personal way and in a very pragmatic way, right? That was going to work for the majority of people in our congregations, right? So people could hear it. Diana, one of our newest participants at UUCM, shared with me a prayer by Rabbi Amichai Lau-Olavi from Israel, Rabbi Tamar Elad Applebaum in Jerusalem, and Sheikha Abtisam Mohammed, a Palestinian living in northern Israel. It was written before this past week, and it speaks to this day. If it does not quite meet you in this moment, may you take heart and rejoice in the possibility that it may very much meet someone near you. And we will make no assumptions. I invite you into a time of prayer. Prayer of mothers for life and peace. God of life, who heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. May it be your will to hear the prayer of mothers. For you did not create us to kill each other, nor to live in fear, anger, or hatred in your world. But rather, you have created us so we can grant permission to one another to sanctify your name of life, your name of peace in this world. For these things I weep. My eye runs down with water, for our children crying at night, for parents holding their children with despair and darkness in their hearts, for a gate that is closing, and who will open it before the day has ended? And with my tears and prayers which I pray, and with the tears of all women who deeply feel the pain of these difficult days, I raise my hands to you. Please, God, have mercy on us. Hear our voice that we shall not despair, that we shall see life in each other, that we should have mercy for each other, that we should have pity on each other, that we shall hope for each other. And we shall write our lives in the book of life. For your sake, God of life, let us choose life. For you are peace. Your world is peace, and all that is yours is peace. And so shall be your will. And I say, maybe you say, Amen. My friends, so may we be. So may we be.
So as we've heard just now, part of our humanist legacy is about redirecting our focus from the supernatural and toward finding the sacred in the material world, with reverence for the intricate web of interdependence and interrelationship that defines life on Earth. So 25% of our offering this month will support wildlife rehabilitation and release, dedicated to the care and rehabilitation of injured and orphaned wildlife. Each year, their team successfully releases over 100 different species of native wildlife, including mammals, songbirds, raptors, waterfowl, reptiles, and amphibians. So if you'd like 100% of your giving to support wildlife rehabilitation and release, please put your offering in the white envelope in the basket. If you are with us by Zoom or desire another way in the room, please see the next slide for other ways to give. Your giving is vital to our ability to sustain the work of our community. And thank you for your generosity. Thank you for your generosity. We dedicate these gifts to honoring, evolving, and manifesting the ideas and values of our shared Unitarian Universalist heritage in the present and the future. And I'd like to thank everyone who helped out today. Rochelle Elias for reading today. Toby Thomas Rose, as always. Our audiovisual team, Bob Miller in Cyprus back there, and our chat host, Eileen Hale, Shanti for the wonderful setting today. Our greeters, Gwen, Iman, Carl Foreman, and Connie Silva, and I saw Laura Harder out there too. Refreshments, Beth Rose. Upstairs with the kids are Lindsay Dunkel and Cheryl Spalding. Yes, quick R, QR, excuse me, which I've learned means quick response. So there's QR codes that you'll see in our slides, and we're going to hear more from Shaban about why those are lurking in the slides. And you'll see one on the next slide about next Saturday's Harvest Festival. That's going to be 3 to 6 next Saturday. Please RSVP. You can scan the code and sign up, buy tickets. We're going to celebrate. There's a song circle, all kinds of great stuff happening. And you can sign up on the sheet of paper back there to participate in. Yes, all right. And you can learn more about our services and upcoming events on our website, uugrassvalley.org.
And that would be Corey Silva, of course, some of us know. We didn't catch that typo on the slide there. So Theodore Parker was one of those people from the Western Unitarian Conference, around the Mississippi, right, who was stretching the boundaries. And so he wrote these words of the hymn, Bob. Be ours a religion. So let our religion be a religion that, like sunshine, goes everywhere. Let our religion's temple be all space. Let our religion's shrine be the good heart. That's our shrine. Let our religion's creed be all truth. Let our religion's ritual be works of love. And there's a final line, may our profession of faith, the way we express our faith, be divine living. In other words, may it be how we live that matters most. Very much the spirit of our ancestors, humanist and otherwise. And to blend this much older text from the 1800s, Toby has written a brand new piece of music to go with it. So I invite you to rise and abide the in spirit. We'll sing it a couple times. Be ours a religion. This is hot off the press from tweaked yesterday, so this is as new as it gets. Our Unitarian heritage bids us light our chalice in the name of freedom, in the light of reason, in actions of tolerance. Our Universalist heritage bids us light our chalice in the name of faith, in the light of hope, and actions of love. As we extinguish our chalice, may we take in and carry that light of our ancestors and of each other this week, opening up possibilities in our days for freedom, for reason, for tolerance, making room one interaction at a time for faith, for hope, for love. So may we be. And together in our benediction, our good words to each other in the midst of all our differences, let's promise and remind each other to carry the flame of peace and love until we meet again. Thanks for your patience. There is a reception special today, souped up with Anita in mind to celebrate, and we'll see you next week where we're looking at vulnerability and power.